Hello and welcome back to the Remain Undefinable podcast. I'm your host, Sadie Gibbs, and we are joined here for part 2 of episode 1, which was about self-worth. We touched on everything that kind of can be a detriment to our self-worth and our self-esteem, things that can tear us down over time, and things that lead to cycles and patterns, which people usually call generational cycles and patterns, which is learned behaviour that comes from parents into your childhood, then onto your children. But it's up to us to kind of stop that cycle and start building the self-worth and the self-esteem and the self-respect and the value in ourselves. We hear all these things, but what do they all mean? And how do they all eventually gradually get worse? And we tend to be led by our ego. We tend to live in an egoic state. It's a fearful consciousness rather than a loving consciousness. Without knowing it, we love with fear. There's always fear there, but what I mean by we love with fear is when we tend to love with fear, how do I word it? We are more inclined to feel judgmental, jealous, controlling, and manipulative of those we love because we have fears of losing or not feeling worthy enough of that love that we are being given at that time. And as you know, I touched on a lot of this in episode 1 about the things that can tear us down, and over time we don't notice these unconscious habits that we've got in place that are adding to that lack of self-worth and self-respect and all those things that come in with valuing ourselves. And something that I heard a lot around 2 years back was you need to value yourself. And I never understood it. I never could get my head around it. What do you mean by value myself? I do value myself. I look after myself. I get my lashes sorted. Well, I don't get my lashes sorted, but I used to. But what I mean is I get my hair done. I'd look after myself in an external way. But what I was neglecting is the internal self-worth. The internal looking after and grooming ourselves. That's what we all neglect. And it is very uncomfortable to start that journey. And I think once you start realizing the depths of the healing and the work that needs to be done in order to have that self-assurance and that self-esteem build. Because after all, we look for it in external validation, a lot of us. That's especially in today's society. I mean, we've got social media, there's so many external ways to get validation. But if you aren't feeling validated or heard on a daily basis with yourself, then the real work and the real self-esteem isn't there. So the moment that external gratification and validation is taken away, our ego is at a loss. It starts looking for short-term pleasure, short-term validation, short-term gratification, which in the long term keeps us from our sustainable goals that we want to adhere and achieve. But when we start doing the work on the internal self-worth, that's the only self-worth we have is internal, and it starts to reflect in our outer world, that's when we start to see, wow, this is going to get me to my goal. This working on my character, understanding myself, understanding my weaknesses, my strengths, understanding the trauma that needs to be healed and unraveled. That's when we really start to find out who we are and what we want, because sometimes what we think we want is based off of those insecurities. It's based off the fearful insecurities and the fearful outlooks and perceptions that we have of ourselves. And it's not based off our true self and our higher self and our deep down core values that we may have had back when we was a child. It's difficult to go back through all the trauma and really, give yourself that hug that you may have needed growing up, or through moments that you didn't get that hug and that support. But there's a quote that I've heard recently, and I want to touch on this before I go into the relationship with food and how that's connected with self-esteem and self-worth, and how we kind of a lot of us use food as almost like a self-destructive, self-sabotage behavior. The unconscious relationship with food is a massive detriment to people's relationship with themselves. I believe if you want to look at your relationship with yourself, first look at your relationship with your nutrition and your diet. It's a massive reflection of someone's relationship with themselves. But let's touch on this quote, because this, for me, was spot on. And it starts with, it's easier to escape a life we don't like than to build a life that we love, that we do not need to escape. And that, for me, if you sit in that, you'll realise that a lot of people are living for the escapes. They're living for the Fridays, the Saturdays, the holidays, when if you really work on yourself and figure out your passions and your purpose, and there's that whole saying of you'll never work a day in your life. We are working, regardless. We all working. But if you love what you're doing, you will wake up every day with that spring in your step. And when it comes to needing a break, it's not that you need a break from what you do. It's just that you need some downtime, some rest. You don't need a break from your life. So I'm going to say that again. It's easier to escape a life you don't like than it is to build a life that you love, that you do not need to escape. Sit with that one. That one is, it just hits the spot. And it makes you think, why would we settle in that? And we are surrounded, growing up, with people telling us, first of all, when we become an adult, what's your plan B? You'll hear that a lot. Do you have a plan B? And this is something I'm extremely passionate about, because, and this all does come in with self-worth, because if you do not value yourself and you do not have that inner self-worth and self-belief to go after your dreams, then you will just think, this is all I'm good for. I can't do anything more. I'm not built to do this or to go after that. This is my desire and my dream in my heart, but I don't have the self-belief and the self-worth to go for it. And then you've got people around you, if you aren't strong-minded, saying, what's your plan B? And the moment you plan a plan B, you're planning to fail. In all my life, trust me, I've come off path so much, because maybe that would be when people would go, okay, it's time to turn to plan B. But what I do, I turn to the next plan A. It's not about having a plan B. It's like, okay, there's a new plan A. And I listen to that inner voice that's telling me there's a new path for you to take. And it's never a plan B. It's a change of course, a change of direction, a diversion. It's the way around an obstacle or a setback. It's when you plan your plan B, you are planning to fail. You are planning, the moment shit gets tough, to turn to your plan B and make that the goal, when it should be, there's a setback, let's fall forwards. You never fail backwards. You can only fail forwards unless you plan a plan B. then you're failing backwards because you're going for something less than what you wanted. If you plan to fail forwards, it's just the next plan A. What's your next plan A? And then you're always going towards the direction you want to go. So do not plan to fail backwards onto a plan B. Never plan a plan B. If it comes to it and there's a setback, there's an obstacle, what's the next plan A? What's the next course of action? What's the next path you're going to take to get to that goal? I have worked social media jobs. I've been a coach since I was 17. That was helping people has always been my predominant passion. I've always had a passion to speak. I've always had a passion to motivate and inspire and uplift people. And I become a coach at a very young age. And before I knew it, I was self-employed up London and PTing, coaching boot camps. I was coaching all over London. And I then started wrestling. And I thought, how can I make more time for wrestling? It wasn't that my PT business was struggling. It was just that I needed to plan my time and have more structure. I couldn't be having clients here, there and everywhere. I needed a couple of days where I had more structure to fit my wrestling in. So this voice, this guide, as we say, said, get a social media job. Before I knew it, one of the members of the gym had said to me, oh, my partner's got a social media role going in his workplace. And this is where I say manifestation. If you have a predominant thought of what you need at that moment of time and you listen to your inner guides, it will appear. It really does. It's happened to me my entire life. That's just one example. Another example is I got released from my contract after getting signed in wrestling and, responsibilities. I was moving out and something in me said, you're going to be a teacher. At that moment of time, I was like, I'm going to teach. I want to teach. I want to teach in a prison. Of all things, I said, I want to teach in a prison. I then moved, got my new place, and within 5 minutes away, I got a job in a prison, which was a 5-minute drive from my house, my new home. So as long as you're always listening to that guide, I'm coming off course here a little bit, but we're going to go back to self-worth. You will always fall back on that main plan, the plan A. Whatever your plan A is, because it will change. What's you for 5 years may not be you for the next 5 years. You have to always remain undefinable in the process of becoming. It's so important because if you're going to fail forwards, that needs to be undefined. But that is what separates the losers from the winners. The winners will always fail forwards onto a new plan A. Losers will plan for a plan B and settle in that and make excuses as to why they did. So never plan a plan B. Let's get back on to the self-worth. My relationship, I'm going to talk about my experiences with food. I had bulimia for between the age of 19 to 23, 22. I used to binge eat to the point of feeling sick, and I'd then go make myself sick. So it was a combination of everything I'd eat, I'd throw up for a period of time, especially when I would indulge and binge to the point of no control. I couldn't even imagine doing that now. And that's when I say it's a form of self-harm. It's a form of self-loathing. Self-loathing. Am I making up words again? But it's a form of harming yourself. Binge eating and making yourself to the point you make yourself sick is a form of harm, self-harm. And this is to do with not feeling good about yourself. When I think about the amount of food I would buy with the intention to binge all that, knowing I'd full well feel sick, how I broke these habits and cycles is I started working on myself. I started going within. I started working on why I do the things I do, why my relationship with food was bad and negative and toxic. And I started to get creative with my food, research, educate myself. I started to educate what sources of food we need. And I just got so obsessed with food for a period of time, tracking macros, learning about food, learning about everything about it. Because I think in power, in education and knowledge, there's power. So the more you educate yourself, the more positive control you're going to have over the things you don't necessarily feel in control of. So I was told fruit was bad for me when I was bodybuilding, and this was bad for me, and that was bad for me. All things that I thought were healthy and that I had managed up to a certain point. It just completely ruined my mindset to food. And I think with the society now that we live in, the amount of knowledge and different things that are online are so confusing. You really do need to educate yourself and find what works for you. That's one thing that I would say. And enjoy food. Enjoy cooking. Enjoy getting creative with it. Don't make it a negative experience, because anything that becomes a negative experience comes with all those negative feelings of shame, guilt. I shouldn't be eating this. This is fattening. I hate that saying, this is fattening. Nothing is fattening. It's calorific. Might have a higher fat content, which means the calories are higher. So it means that you just need to adapt your calories that day. It's all about perception, just like life. How we look at food is your perspective, and knowledge and educating yourself is going to help with your perspective to food, and then it makes you feel better towards your relationship with food. Same with life. How we look at life and current situations that we're in, how our perspective is currently looking at the circumstances that we're in, the situation that we're in. If our perspectives are good, our life is going to feel better, and you're going to create better and attract better. For example, when I first got into wrestling, I broke my arm. I just started getting the flow of it, and I broke my wrist, snatching of all things, doing some weights. I fell back onto a rig in the gym, and I remember going to the hospital, and I just thought, I broke my right arm. Wrestling's all on the left. That means I can use my left more, focus on the left more. It might get me not to give my right arm. And I completely changed my perspective and made a broken arm positive. And I've always had the gift to do that without really knowing what I was doing. And now I know what I did back then. I'm like, fucking hell, you were smart before you knew it. Just the power of perspective. The power of perspective can change your life and completely change your outcomes. But if you are struggling with food and your relationship with food, please send me a message. I would love to give some more help or answer the poll, which I'm going to attach to this podcast. And yeah, I will go into a whole episode on nutrition and food and really dive in as to why it's so important and how you can change your perspective and the tools you can use and the methods that I used. It didn't happen overnight. I'm 32 now, and I started my journey with food and myself and going inward when I was 23. That's when I really started to want to work on my nutrition. And it took a lot of time to break the cycles of binge eating and restricting calories and all the bad habits we get into with our nutrition. It took a long time for me to get as consistent as I am now, and it's the best shape that I've been in consistently for the last 2-3 years. Nothing, I don't really fluctuate anymore. It's consistent, and I think that's because I'm consistent with myself and forever doing more inner work, and it's just improving everything more and more for me. But the main thing is that you notice where you may be self-harming. In self-harm isn't just physical. It isn't. Self-harm is maybe being in the mirror unconsciously for 20 minutes, picking at your face. Maybe sitting biting your nails for 20 minutes till there's no skin around you, until you've got sore nails. Maybe there is so many things that we do unconsciously when we are at war with ourselves. For me, I used to attack my face. Like, God, whenever I was in, I guess, abusive situations and traumatic situations in relationships, that's when I'd really pick. And yeah, now when I look back, if I ever catch myself picking, I'm like, okay, what's going on? I go and get a pad, get a notebook, and I'm like, what's going on? What's bothering me at the moment? What's triggering me? What might be making me feel unsettled, nerving? I mean, I don't tend to do it now, but if I did that would be I would be able to notice straight away, okay, something's not right. Something's making me feel very anxious. Something's making me emotional at the moment. Something's making my self-worth be questioned. Yeah. But this episode was more to touch on how we punish ourselves when we have a low level of self-esteem and low level of self-worth. How we drink to the point of passing out and smashing our head. Maybe because we feel uncomfortable in social environments. Maybe because our anxiety is bad in social environments. So we drink to mask. It's a tough thing when you start to hold yourself accountable for your own shit and start noticing the things you do that harm yourself and that harm how you feel about yourself. And once you start to look at those things and start to unravel and really dive into them, you will feel low, you will feel a bit down, you will feel a bit depressed, you will feel like you're grieving the old you, because it's the you that you understand, the you that has thrived. I say thrived, the you that has survived in chaos, coping mechanisms, masking. That is not you. The you that wants to be born and the you that wants to come through is the you that needs you. It needs you to step in. It needs you to be there for yourself. The you that needs you to start being the word of comfort and safety that maybe you needed growing up. You need that for yourself. When you go to repeat a bad cycle, have a word with yourself. I do it. I talk to myself. I'll say it. I'll go. If I'm going to break something that I've been really strong in, for example, maybe you want to text the ex that you left. Maybe you want to phone call the ex that you left. Maybe you're having these, I'm missing him or her. And then you think, hold on. I've been so disrespected in that relationship. I've been so hurt in that relationship. They've made me feel so unworthy. Why on earth would I want to tell someone that's made me feel like that, I miss them, or I'm still love you, and then you have that word with yourself where you go, no, you deserve more. And that's what I do now. I speak to myself in moments like that. I will have a hard word with myself like I would a friend. And I'm that friend for myself finally. And you get stronger and your self-esteem starts to go up. Your self-worth starts to build and you start to get that self-assurance that you maybe would have had if you had that from parents when you were younger. You start to build that for yourself going forward. But I don't want to talk, I want to keep my episodes 15 to 20 minutes long, but I'm going to do a poll after this. So any questions you have, please also send them through the Remain Undefinable podcast account on Instagram. Please DM me on there because I would love to do Q&As on here and answer questions and really engage with you guys and yeah, hopefully get the podcast going in the direction that I want it to go. But just know that you deserve what you give. You deserve more than being made to feel less worthy of who you are. Yeah. No one should make you feel bad about yourself. And no one means yourself. You should not make yourself feel bad about yourself. And if you are, now what do you say every time you look in the mirror? You're aware of those faults? What do you say? Is it kind, nice things? Or is it, oh, look at this, look at that. Oh, this needs work, that needs work. Oh, yeah. I'm doing it. Oh, no, it's because once you start to recognize every fault and be observant of every fault that you have, you'll start to realize that you are very unkind to yourself. So when others are unkind to you, you allow it for a period of time. You allow it, you absorb it, you take it in. It just adds to what you already feel about yourself. But thank you for listening to part 2 of episode 1, touching on self-worth, because it is such a huge subject. I am going to do another 3 parts to this. But yeah, this is part 2 and I've covered a fair bit. Also, remember, part of building your self-worth and your self-esteem is to always plan A and plan to fail forwards. Never plan to fall backwards. Plan B is for planning to fail backwards. That's not going to build your character. It's not going to build who you are. It's not going to build your confidence in that direction you're trying to go and the things you're trying to achieve. Plan A and know that if it starts to have to adapt and change, that you'll plan another plan A to come out of that and get back to where you're going. Not everyone has a clean run. Sometimes there's a lot more work you need to do as a person before you can be back on that main plane A. But always plan to fall forwards, because that's what's going to build you as well. If you're planning plan Bs with a low confidence and a low self-esteem, be prepared to fall onto that plan B. Thank you for listening, and I will see you all in part 3, episode 1. Still episode 1 of Self-Worth, part 3. But I will see you then.